Hello, my name is Gilbert Stewart.
Oh, just said two.
Gilbert Stewart?
Yeah. You did say first name.
Hi, my name is Joseph.
Name's Carl.
Can you do a retake?
Retake.
My name is Tariq.
Man, my name is Mike. So now that we all know each other, we can move on. If I said that if you give me $10, I'll issue you $1,000 worth of credit, that would be a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Of course it would be a good deal.
Yes.
So that's pretty much how the banking systems have been working, getting actual cash for credit or gold assets for credit. I did a lot of research on the subject in order to bring you the most accurate information. Now, ever since the signing of the Constitution in 1789, Congress and presidents have debated as to whether or not it was constitutional to have Congress stand up a central banking agency. Now, we needed a central banking agency to handle the nation's credits, to issue money across the nation, and also to regulate the flow of money and the value of it. So, what we're going to talk about first is the creation of the first central banking agency, which was the first Bank of the United States. Then we're going to talk about the second Bank of the United States, which came after the first bank's 20-year charter expired, and then we're going to move into the creation of the Federal Reserve Act. So we're going to go way back in the history, back in 1789 when the Constitution was first ratified, and that was during the presidency of George Washington. So during his time, he had a Secretary of Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, and a Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and they had a little debate, and they said, Alexander Hamilton said, okay, well, we need to find a way to regulate the nation's money. And he wanted to create a bank that Congress, would, pretty much bless off on. And Thomas Jefferson said, no, the Constitution doesn't say that Congress has the power to create a bank. And he says, well, the Constitution doesn't say that they don't have the power, so he talked George Washington, he blessed off on it, 1791, the first Bank of the United States was stood up. Now, they had $10 million of assets. $8 million came from private bankers, $2 million came from the government. They had 25 directors. 20 of them came from private bankers, 5 of them were from the government. So, of course, private bankers were the majority in the first Bank of the United States. They were assigned a 20-year charter, which is the time span that they can run. And within the first 6 years, by 1795, the government had utilized 60% of its capital. So they had borrowed $6 million from the first bank. So, of course, this had to be repaid. The bank had a major impact on the economy. It was the first large industrial corporation that the United States had. And they flooded within the first 2 months, they flooded the economy with all kinds of credit. So everybody was out there buying stuff. Then they said, you know what, now we need our money back. So anybody who put up assets against the money that was loaned out, if they couldn't pay the money back or they defaulted on the loan, then of course the assets got taken. And that's how the bank did business. So it attributed to the economy's success and also the failure. So after the 20-year charter expired, it wasn't renewed. Then into the term of James Madison, when he said, okay, well, we actually still need a way to manage the nation's finances. So what he did was he said, let's stand up another central banking agency, which was the second Bank of the United States. That one lasted all the way into the presidency of Andrew Jackson. And he didn't really believe in having the private bankers have so much power and influence on the nation's finances and the way that they manage money. And his saying was that, such concentration of power in the hands of such few is irresponsible to the people. So he didn't really like that idea. So after the second bank was, the charter expired, we had a time frame where we had national banks stood up and we had private local banks stood up. And the problem with that was the currency was inelastic, which means that it couldn't be used to pay taxes, for the government and pay nations' debts because it would only be recognized in the area where the currency was created. So, of course, by 1893, there was a crisis, a financial crisis, because of the inelasticity of the currency that was being produced, and the economy ended up crashing, and that brought into where we're at right now, into the creation of the Federal Reserve Act. And that was during the time of President Woodrow Wilson. Now, there was a guy, one of his senators, Nelson Aldrich. He was a very influential senator during the time, and he said, we need to find a way that we can stand up another central banking agencies, and he wanted to give the majority of power back to the private bankers. His only daughter married one of the Rockefellers, and of course the Rockefellers were one of the power gods of the time or whatever. So everybody felt like they had an ulterior motive with presenting his new plan as far as the central banking agency went. So moving right along, when we had the Secretary of State for Woodrow Wilson, a guy by the name of Will Bryan. He had an idea also, integrated with what Nelson Aldrich and his predecessors presented as far as the central banking system. He said that, well, if we have a couple Federal Reserves spread out around the country, we divide it off into districts and make those the central banks. We take away the, central, just having one bank managing the whole nation's finances. We have the power spread out amongst 12 different banks, and in that way we can, manage the nation's finances without having a centralized banking system. In 1912, the House Banking and Currency Committee sat down and they looked at the way the nation's finances were being handled, and they determined that it was in a money trust, which pretty much meant it was in the hands of a few financial, power gods or whatever at the time, and they didn't really like that idea. So after Woodrow Wilson reviewed his Secretary of State's plan, in 1912 he ended up signing the Federal Reserve Act, and of course that went through a whole lot of modifications since then in order to come up to where we're at right now. There was a Will Glass proposal that happened around that time, where he said that we should set 20 regional banks, around 20 or more regional banks, in order to manage the nation's finances, and of course that one flopped as well. Okay, in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it says that Congress is the only body that can coin money and regulate the value thereof. But of course, now we have the Federal Reserve that's out there coining money and regulating the value. One of the Rothschilds said that allow me to control and issue the nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws. So that means that right now, the way we have the private bankers integrated into our financial system, then they make pretty much the rules on how things go. So right now we have about 10 different private bankers in our Federal Reserve that contribute to our government, which is the Rothschilds of London and Berlin, Hamburg, New York. We have bankers from Paris and Italy, and also from all over the world right now that contribute to our banking system. The reason why we have the system, of course, is because we needed a way to regulate the nation's finances and the money, and that resulted in having these private bankers integrated into our system. Just to recap, the first banking system was stood up as the first Bank of the United States, and then we moved over to the second Bank of the United States after the 20-year charter expired for the first bank, and then now we have the Federal Reserve Act, which is still in place today. So that's where we're at. Mr. Rothschild said that if he can control the money, then he has the power. So that's currently all the way to the creation of the Federal Reserve Act.